Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to the Roundtable. In the first edition of 2024, we are joined by Dr. Park Hong-kwon and Dr. Kim Hana. Dr. Park is a professor of North Korean Studies at Ewha Women's University, and Dr. Kim Hana is a professor of International Studies at Seoul University. Welcome to the Roundtable.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Professor Park, how does it feel like having a New Year, 2024? You must have a New Year's resolution.
Well, usually I have, but my resolution always could not meet this
Okay.
what I
Same
planned. So this year I try to be careful. But by the way, this year is the year of dragon. It's a very meaningful year, and dragon symbolizes success and prosperity. So I hope that all the people can enjoy this kind of very successful year for this year.
Okay, Professor Kim, how does it feel for you to have 2024?
Yeah, so 2023 went by very quickly.
Right.
It felt like it just went by in a flash. And I also did not keep any of my resolutions last year. So this year I'm hoping to focus a bit more on my research and then work on my publications.
Okay.
Dr. Bong, what do you plan to do this year?
My New Year's resolution is not to plan. Because I realize that I'm kind of obsessed with planning, and I realize that I have not really met my goals. So rather than just keep on disappointing myself, I just turn to the old proverb that man plans and God laughs.
Actually, we share the same kind of resolution.
Right.
this year.
No resolution is the best resolution.
Yeah, right.
I'm just thinking of how I can do my best and more to make this program more accessible, easier to swallow for our viewers in the world. So having said that, I'd like to plunge into our forecast of the new year. So Dr. Park, in 2024, what issue do you think is most important?
Do you think that it is possible to have a summit between South and North Korea this year?
That's a very tough one to answer. So I'd like to just invite Dr. Kim to join me, and let's answer at the same time.
Sounds
1,
good.
2, 3.
No.
No.
No? Okay. Why not?
Well, Dr. Kim, why not?
To be completely honest, it depends, but
It depends.
I think that it may be unlikely for a summit to be held this year, especially because for South Korea, one of the primary conditions is for North Korea to show some willingness in terms of at least partially freezing its nuclear activity. But right now, North Korea is working more closely with Russia in terms of its security cooperation, and it's also increasing bilateral trade with China. So with the support of China and Russia, UN sanctions are going to be virtually negated. And so in that kind of situation, it's very unlikely for North Korea to halt or freeze its nuclear activities, even partially. So I don't know if a summit will be happening anytime soon or any type of bilateral talks.
Right. First of all, my answer is based upon the prospect for the partnership in the United States. Why North Korean regime would bother to try to engage in negotiation with the Biden administration. I mean, if I were in the position of Kim Jong-un regime of North Korea, rather wait for the outcomes of the U.S. presidential election to come about in the November 2024. And if Mr. Donald Trump gets elected for the second term, then if I were North Korean regime, I would cultivate the negotiation with him.
It seems to me it's a very controversial subject they chose, but it turned out that everybody, including me, share the same answer. My answer is also no, because it's a very difficult, almost impossible. Still, North Korea has maintained so-called frontal breakthrough line. They simply confirmed this kind of the lie the last month when they held the plenary meeting. It means that North Korea has no intention to have any kind of meaningful dialogue with South Korea and United States unless they are going to achieve the final goal, that is the completion about their nuclear capabilities. I think this year North Korea is going to continue to have this development of their nuclear capabilities, especially about two things, the spy satellite and the Hwasong-18, that solid fuel ICBMs. North Korea will wait until they see the result of the U.S. presidential election, and probably it means that next year North Korea have made chance to come to the negotiation table with the new U.S. the administration or the Biden administration again, because it is very essential, imperative for the North Korea to come to the negotiation table and then finally achieve the status as the de facto nuclear weapon state. So I think next year is going to be a very important year for North Korea.
Yeah, why I mentioned the outcome of the U.S. presidential election is important for North Korean regime's willingness to engage in inter-Korean summit is that North Korean regime has demonstrated its strategy that inter-Korean summit meeting is kind of prelude or stepping stone for North Korean regime to engage in high-level diplomatic talks with the United States. So inter-Korean summit meeting is largely dependent upon the outcomes of the presidential election in the United States in that regard. According to a survey by the Peaceful Unification Advisory Council, nearly 40% of 100 South Koreans selected the normalization of inter-Korean relations as a top priority in unification and North Korea policies in 2024. It is a meaningful result, showing many South Koreans are eagerly hoping for better relations between the two Koreas. But of course, it's highly dependent on how you would define normalization of inter-Korean relations.
Well, in that same survey, I remember that South Korean answered that they simply maintain status quo and without any kind of serious military confrontation between North and South Korea. So in other words, South Korean people simply tired about the North Korean provocation, and especially young generation, they are far less likely to have this reunification. It means that just one nation state, and rather just live separately between North and South Korea. So that's what they want, and that's also worrisome sign for the many people, because anyway, our ultimate goal should be the reunification.
Right. The beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, right? Professor Kim, what is the issue that you think very important in the year 2024?
So the topic I picked is just as difficult to predict as Professor Park's topic. And
well, actually, mine is not that difficult.
Oh, okay, mine is more difficult then. So the topic I picked is whether, and it's a question, so will President Yoon Suk-yeol and his Chinese counterpart, President Xi Jinping, hold a summit this year?
Oh, that's tough one.
What's your answer to this tough one?
Well, it seems to me it's not that easy at this moment. The Yoon Suk-yeol government pretty much emphasized the principle of the mutual respect and reciprocity, because it is true that the last time the Xi Jinping paid a visit to South Korea is 2014. 2014, yes,
right.
And after that, our former president Park Geun-hye and Moon Jae-in paid a visit to China at least 5 times. So we all know that it is time to Xi Jinping to pay the visit to South Korea. So that's our government emphasized so-called principle of mutual respect. But problem is that, so we are seeing the last year, the November, when the 3 countries' foreign ministers gathered at Busan, from, of course, Japan, China and South Korea, and they are talking about the trilateral summit. Of course, trilateral summit among the 3 countries means that Xi Jinping would not come, and the Li Chang, the prime minister, is going to come to. But anyway, they have kind of failed to set the date for this year's when they're going to meet. So overall situation is getting tough. But without summit, still we have, South Korea can improve. And of course, China side too, the bilateral relations. We have to think about how this is actually actualize the kind of improvement of the relationship between these 2 countries.
Professor Kim, my answer is that it is unlikely to happen, but there's a chance. If China is going to show more sincere effort to accommodate the South Korean public's expectation for acceptable bilateral partnership, then it is feasible, but it is a big if question. I'm saying this is that, as Professor Park mentioned, with the President Xi Jinping's visit to Seoul in 2014, South Korean public, especially young generation in South Korean society, were disappointed by his remark that he delivered at the Seoul National University in front of the university students that he mentioned that in the past history, Korea and China united in fight for justice in international relations, especially against Japan. But the young generation in South Korea were perplexed and disappointed by the fact that he had demonstrated very selective reading past history. They asked, what about China's participation in the Korean War, aiding North Korea? And what about Manchu's invasion in the 17th century against Korea? So unless Chinese leadership is going to show a sincere effort to accommodate the historical view of young generation in South Korean society, and as Professor mentioned, the principled and balanced partnership between the two countries, then there wouldn't be any big pressure on the Yoon Suk-yeol government of South Korea to pursue a bilateral summit meeting in near future.
The upcoming trilateral summit between Korea, Japan, and China is supposed to take place in Seoul. And so if Chinese Premier Li Qiang or even possibly President Xi Jinping decides to visit, then it could potentially thaw relations to a certain extent. But as you mentioned, it also depends on what they say if they come. So.
I'm going to do what I have learned in the classroom. That whenever I receive a very tough question from my student, I usually turn it to another student. That's an excellent question, and what do you think? So I'm going to ask both of you to answer the question at the same time. Will the war in Ukraine end in the year 2024? How do you assess the possibility? 3, 2, 1.
Yes.
Yes or no?
All right, we will begin with you, Professor Park.
Well, this is a very tough question, but at the same time, a very important question. But I think I listed 2 factors that make a very huge impact, whether it's going to be an end of the war or it is simply bring the truce or armistice. First, of course, presidential election of the United States in November, because already the former President Trump officially mentioned that if he would be a president again, and he's going to the end of the war within the 24 hours. So it means that probably United States stop any kind of support to the Ukraine, and the Trump definitely want to get some Nobel Peace Prize, and this is one of the possibility. And the other important factor is the Ukrainian people's will, whether they continue to have the war or not. But it brings me the memory of the Korean War, the whole process of the armistice and between North and South Korea. It took almost 3 years, because it's for the South Korean people, it's illegally invaded by it. So we have to fight back. And the same kind of things to apply the Ukrainian people. And they are, even though they are losing some of their definitely legal territory to Russia. So I think it depends on the Ukrainian people's will too.
Okay, Dr. Kim?
I completely agree with Professor Park. It's yes and no in the sense that there may not be an actual formal armistice that's signed, but there's definitely going to be de-escalation. The war technically started around February 2022, meaning that it's almost been 2 years since the war has started. And so as Professor Park mentioned, a lot of people in Ukraine are exhausted. The international community is also dealing with war fatigue. The US elections are going to be coming up this November. And so Biden probably wants to maintain his support to a certain extent by continuing the same foreign policy that he has had towards Ukraine. But also the Russian presidential elections are going to be taking place in March of this year. So Putin may also want to try to maintain his image, but also end the war to a certain extent. And so in many different ways, we can imagine that in the very least, there's going to be more de-escalation of the tension.
See, this is the reason why I, rather than directly answer a bright student's tough question, turn to student to answer the question on my behalf. I agree with you in terms of giving you my answer, which is also yes and no. Unfortunately, to people in Ukraine, because it depends on how you define the end of the war, right? Like the Korean War. Legally speaking, we are still in the state of the Korean War because the Korean War has not officially terminated, but in reality, we are living with the state of the war for the past 70 years. I think similar situation might be coming in the year 2024 for people in Ukraine. that it'll be very difficult for both sides, Russia and Ukraine, to come up with a mutually agreeable term of the actual termination of war. So the best hope would be temporary ceasefire, something very similar to the 2014 Minsk agreement, which will be satisfactory to no side, unfortunately. But I agree that the dynamics of the presidential election in the United States would galvanize the voice of the Tea Party and other conservatives in the U.S. politics, arguing that why United States keeps on using precious taxpayers' money to give a blank check to the Ukraine. So there will be a pressure in the United States.
Right, but at the same time, the mainstream, the American strategists, and they are strongly support the war against the Russia because they are saying that United States simply spend less than 4% of their budget, and then even they haven't sent the ground troops, soldiers, no boots on the Ukraine war. So it's definitely needed to continue the war. And then I think it's important how, I totally agree with how it ends and what kind of situation that we are going to see is a very important point.
But my point is that when it comes to the scorecard of international security and peace, it is very difficult for any leaderships to concretely demonstrate to the public that it has been the winning strategy, because it is very hard to argue that, see, our plan has been working because of these and these that result. Because the best thing you can hope is to maintain peace. Peace is very difficult to measure, so it will be very difficult for the Biden administration to actually persuade the suspicious voters that we needed to take this action and your taxpayers' money has not been wasted, because the results may be quite elusive and uncertain to the eyes of the U.S. Voters.
Right.
So on a lighter note, I have a question for both of you. Do you like cooking?
I love cooking done by others.
Well, I like eating.
Right, same answer.
I did too, and I really like a lot of Korean food. And so recently there was some interesting news. So according to Google, which is the #1 search engine in the world, Korea's traditional dish bibimbap was the most searched recipe last year.
Okay.
And the US tech giant released in its annual year in search, and bibimbap topped the list of most Googled recipes.
Oh, that's amazing, because usually the traditional cultural products Korea to be adopted in the global scenes, the product had to be adapted, right, to the local cultures. But bibimbap on itself has a very strong appeal to the global consumers. That's very amazing.
Yeah, when I ask my students, they think that it's usually tteokbokki or kimchi that's more famous, but it was bibimbap. So here's my question. Do you think the global popularity of K-content will continue to grow and reach new heights this year?
I think so. Some skeptics would argue that the best days of the Korean contents are behind us, because if you look back the popularity of the movies in Hong Kong in the past, or the J-pop in the 1970s. Yes, I'm that old. Everything has its own heydays and eventual decline. So K-pop may not be an exception to this rule, but I still believe that there's still much left in the tank of the K-contents, because it has just begun. It has a relatively short history since it's the beginning of the popularity in global scale. As you mentioned, that Korean wave, Hallyu, started with the popularity of the music videos of the Korean stars, and the Korean movies began to be very popular to the global viewers. Then you move to K-beauty products, and now you're talking about Korean foods, not the westernized Korean food, but authentic Korean food. So I think we are still quite in the early stage of the rise of Korean wave.
Well, actually, I agree with you. So we are thinking about how it's evolved for past several years and start with K-pop music and then drama and movie. And finally, you just mentioned about the K-food and even beauty and those kind of things are pretty much extended to the include the various area. So I think it's not the temporary trend or phenomena. It's going to be continued. And other the kind of arguments that it's going to be continued because of this global fandom we are seeing. It's not limited to South Korea, but we are the most, of course, famous case is ARMY all over the world for the BTS. And then right now, I see another thing is that like a global collaboration. Not only the South Korea, but it's pretty much extended. They bring many countries together and we have collaborated. There's many successful collaboration story. So I think it's gonna be continued.
What do you think?
I think it's really interesting that both of you think that it's in the early stages because for K-pop, for example, there have already been 5 generations of K-pop groups. So you mentioned ARMY. Do you know which generation BTS is?
I think third generation?
Third generation,
yes.
yes. So BTS and Blackpink, both of which are very famous groups, they're third generation. And New Jeans, which became famous last year, they're 4th generation. So now we're already in the 5th generation, but we're seeing this K-pop boom increase. And so when I ask my students, they say it's because the lyrics of K-pop songs really resonate with them. And even with K-movies such as Parasite or K-dramas such as Squid Game, they focus on issues, social issues that everyone around the world can understand, such as inequality. And they do it in a very creative way. So that seems to be part of the reason why K-content has increased exponentially in its influence.
Well, at the same time, I see the growing numbers of the exchange students to come to South Korea. And even my university, there are many foreign students. And if I ask why you decided to come to South Korea, they are saying that these K-contents and K-pop, K-food, and they really like the South Korea. So I think very hopeful sign.
Well, alongside of the official diplomatic effort of Korea, I think the spread of Korean contents really enhanced the image of Korea and its global status, right? What benefits will the success of K-contents bring to us in addition to all this?
I think it has already brought a lot of successes, and it's brought about successful cultural exchanges. As Professor Park mentioned, a lot of students come to Korea because of their interest in K-content, and that leads them to work here or live here afterwards as well. We're seeing a lot more visitors and tourists who come here because of K-content, so areas such as Myeongdong, where there's a lot of stuff related to K-pop, a lot of people go there. But also, it enhances Korea's soft power. So Korea's soft power diplomacy has grown in its influence where it can attract people all over the world without using coercion, right, just through culture alone. So Korea's soft power diplomacy has become more effective.
South Korea is a very distinctive status in the world stage. South Korea is, we are saying that we are like a very globalized, we are very advanced, we are the member of OECD, even we are leading the culture. So the Western, usually called the Western country, consider Korea is one of them. But at the same time, the so-called global North. And then global East, we are located in here. And it means that global East usually include South Korea, Japan, and China. And at the same time, South Korea has experience of the global South. We've been decolonized by Japan for 36 years. So when we are talking about every country in the world, we can share this kind of experience. We are quite we can make a quite persuasive argument of those countries, even global South. And they said, oh, you are the advanced country, you don't know the past history. But we did know. So we can have a very distinct, but also very kind of advantage us the position to lead some important issue in the world stage.
I remember in 1960s, the GDP per capita of South Korea was only $84. So South Korean citizens used to live with $84 for the entire year in the 1960s. As a special edition to celebrate the start of the new year, we have discussed a variety of issues from inter-Korean ties to international affairs and to Korean contents. 2024 is the year of the Blue Dragon. I hope Korea will make a great stride and leap forward like a dragon soaring into the sky. Now we have to wrap up today's edition. Before saying goodbye, let's wish our viewers a Happy New Year together. 1, 2, 3.
Happy New Year!